Recording is on.
All right, so today is April 4th, 2021, and it's our special Megalesia celebration of Extinctionati meeting. So I know we have quite a few topics. Where do we want to start?
Well, we should start.
Or where should we start?
Just giving like praise for this day, and it's so auspicious and it's so important in history. Just the fact that date is the 4th of the 4th. This is the last quarter of the southernmost moon. It's the day of Ishtar, the Holy Mother, and it's the Magna Mater. So this is her day, and it's everybody's tried to bomb it and game jack it. The Christians are still at it. They can't get rid of the white rabbit. They can't get rid of the Easter eggs. It's still called Ishtar, and they try as they might. They try and divert the kids, tell them bullshit this and bullshit that, and you just can't rub it out. That's the power of an ARG right there. But anyway, I think we should probably talk a bit about Cybele and what the day is. And I think there's a growing theme that I think we've been investigating, and that's sexuality and gender. And that's a topic which, I mean, you just see these things now about this rape culture and stuff, and it's going batty. It's going batty. So I think we should start talking about hard topics.
May I add that Gary, who's not here, has put quite a long list that I'm looking at the moment on Reddit of points that he wanted to bring up that has to do with what you're saying. I looked at his points and they're really interesting. They could be good starts for conversation and whatever you think.
Go for it. Let's start there.
But the first thing he talks about the spiritual aspect when he says the trans people might be missing the call to find their true self, instead arriving at a new egoic self. And
Jesus, I believe that. Yeah.
And then a comparison to the bodily modification native people go into, from elongated lips, ears, and necks to all manner of scarification, and an amazingly extreme example I would describe. And a few other things he talks about, but we could go back to that later on.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. Let's start on that, because the first thing to talk about is the kind of resurgence. It's a fad of body modification, and this idea of gender dysphoria. There's an epidemic of gender dysphoria, and so you shouldn't just take it as something that is new. I think anybody that's listening to this, it's a contentious subject because people might have had, gender surgery, or they might be thinking they're gay or straight or something. So what we're trying to do is, we're not trying to bash anybody. We're trying to get deeper to see somebody to try and understand the whole thing as a phenomena and not get personal. So, and the whole point of doing that is that, nobody has to go to the gas chambers if we understand it. If you do ego bashing and everybody stands up for gay rights, I'm telling you, somebody's going to the gas chambers. You put down that rainbow flag, man. That anybody that raises a flag, I don't care what's on it, somebody's going to the gas chamber at the end of that. You just take that as read. That is not the way to go. Fighting for gay rights or LGBTQ and stuff is like, nope. That you are fighting for an ego, and what you're doing is you're creating the shadow of that ego in the opposite. And one day that the shadow will be in supremacy. You might be in supremacy now, laughing your head off at cancel culture and stuff. The shoe will be on the other foot, and then basically that other foot is a big boot, especially for people that are gay and stuff like that. You go and see how big that boot is in Nazi Germany. So just, so if you are gay and stuff, before you get your ego hackles up, I'd say we're fighting your side. We're trying to keep you out of the gas chamber. So so first off, you're heading for a gas chamber. What you're doing now is exactly the wrong thing psychologically to be doing. So let's start with trying to understand it. And the first thing to do is just to say it's a phenomenon, an increasing phenomenon. There is something lost in where it came from what people don't notice now is suddenly everybody is, having gender alteration, having trans and LGBTQ rights. It started off in the 80s. Okay, let's go from the female, born female, cis female gender. It started in the 80s and the first sign of this phenomena was anorexia nervosa and bulimia. So they were eating disorders. Now you say, well, what's eating disorders got to do with being trans? Well, a lot, especially in women. See, what is behind body shaming and the things that people started, women, young girls in particular, prepubescent girls, started starving themselves. And the psychology behind that is quite well understood by psychologists, and it's trying to delay puberty. So what they're trying to do is they see their breasts coming out and they try and starve themselves, get the fat out of their body, and just stop themselves maturing into women. And the reason is that they have anxiety about fulfilling the role of a woman. There's particularly association with things like childbirth and a terror of going through childbirth, and basically it's pretty freaking traumatic. I tell you, I think I speak for most men, whereas I'm glad I'm not a woman. What I know about childbirth is freaking secondhand. But I know childbirth hurts like fuck, because my wife's fingers went into my hand and fucking hell, it hurt like shit. So I know firsthand that, childbirth is agony. Women don't like that joke. But the thing is that we went from there. It wasn't addressed. The thing about bulimia and eating disorders, it wasn't addressed in the 80s. There was a campaign to stop body shaming and to address it was addressed in terms of obesity and eating disorders. It didn't go away. It reemerged as tattooing and body piercing, and particularly now gender alteration and transitioning. And it's more prevalent on the female side. So I feel very strongly that, although it's contentious, I feel very strongly that it's to do with our society and where our society's got to. I think that most girls today that are feeling that they have gender dysphoria, they actually are really just feeling depressed about where the world is and, basically society. So they're taking on all the angst of our society, and then there's now a group of trans people that they amount to a cult, and they are saying, they are reinforcing their cult identity as trans people and recruiting. So now this is something that's well known throughout the ages, and it goes all the way back now to Sibylle. So if you look at the Hijra in India, they do this too. The Hijra are also a kind of a cult of eunuchs, and they can't grow by most religious cults. They have kids, like the Catholics and the Islamic cults. They grow by indoctrination. The biggest growing religion now, apart from atheism, and is Islam, and it's not growing by recruiting or conversion. It's growing because they're just having more kids. So it's the same with atheists as well, I guess, are having more kids. But that's the way it's growing, is childhood indoctrination into the thing. So the Hijra are doing kind of like what trans people are doing. It's not unknown for the Hijra to actually kidnap kids, especially if they're effeminate and look like they could be gay, to kidnap them and, cut their balls off, make them, mutilate them, and then put them in dresses, and so they become part of the Hijra. So that is, I can see that happening already in the trans culture. Now, there's something in the trans culture that's it's worth investigating. Is what's going on with something that's so unnatural that it means that you can't perpetuate yourself. You can't propagate as an organism. Now, it's just basic biology that, for obvious reasons, animals that don't value their progeny or their ability to procreate or their genitals can't procreate. And if there's a gene for that, you die out very quickly. So it is unnatural because, you know, it's terminal. For example, if you take all the trans people and gay people now, they're not going to be able to breed. I mean, you can have artificial wombs, and they're doing research into artificial wombs and transplants of wombs into males and stuff. But this is not, you're not going to get a successful line of breeding organisms this way. Even if you do it by technical means, you have X and Y chromosomes, and you have the, you know, laws of procreation and biology, and you can't get around them with technical means. Even if you do, it'll cost money, and either way, and if you just take a competitive Darwinian landscape, you're onto a loser for basically a population that tries to thrive this way. So do you want to say anything, Sophie? There's like...
Yes, and infertility is growing anywhere since the 80s, everywhere, not just in Europe and America, but also in China and India. So there is also that element that's, I think it's coming from various causes, as much as environmental and also rise of sexually transmitted infections, all sorts of other things. But it's startling, the infertility. It is, and I think one of the big things is people are having children later, where their fertility is much lower. So you know, if you had your kids at 16 or 17, you wouldn't have that problem. You'll have it at 30, 35, 40. But yeah. No,
but also the petrochemicals and the estrogen mimics and stuff, they're also delaying, well, they acting like the pill. In fact, the pill is taken so much now that you know, it's in the water supply in the sea. It's turning all the seals off Britain into females. There's so much estrogen in the water. But estrogen is a simple molecule, and a lot of mimics, especially in the petrochemical industry and plastics.
Yeah. But the pill is mimicking mimicking a pregnancy in certain ways. It's replaced the multiple pregnancies that women used to have before, and it sort of starts them at 18 or 17 or 16 with a prolonged series of pregnancies where where a pregnant woman would have a lot of estrogens and a lot of other hormones that would be going in the environment by the urine, it would be normal hormones, but natural hormones. But the ones that are excreted by the pill takers is a complete different type of estrogen and progesterone, because they're nearly all synthesized in labs. So, you know, you're talking, but it is actually what it's doing, actually. And there's something very interesting, because when they invented the pill in the 60s, because it was going to stop the ovulation, everybody understands that, it was going to stop the periods. So they said, oh my God, what are we going to do? Because first, the church didn't like that. The industry didn't like that, because they were selling tampons and all sorts of protections. So we say, oh, we're going to give a little gap in the pill. So the women are going to take it for 21 days. And for 7 days, they're going to have a little withdrawal bleeding that is absolutely artificial, so that things will stay a little bit like they used to be, which is an enormous lie. And it's become, when I was explaining that to some patients in the family planning clinics where I work, they say, but do you mean we could be taking the pill all the time without having this? I said, yeah, it has absolutely no medical effect, but it's one of the examples of the manipulation. But the church and the industry wanted women to have this little withdrawal bleed that you would never have during a pregnancy. And it has no medical basis. I've read numerous articles through the 90s and 2000s about that. There's absolutely no medical reason to do that. And what can you do? The packaging comes in 21 little tablets that the lady takes and stops religiously for 7 days. to mimic a 28-day natural cycle.
Yeah. So, but in terms of the unsustainability of the culture is of the trans culture is, the industrial society is making people infertile for so many reasons, but I think there's one of them is just the plain unhealthiness of just the stress and unhealthiness apart from all the chemical side effects. I believe that there is something in hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers, the evidence is that they self-regulated their populations, and so the female body under stress will not have kids. If it's after the war, then it shows a spike in demographics. All the baby boomers came back, and then they say, well, all the GIs came home and banged their wives. I don't think that's the case. I think what happened was that there was a feel-good boom. And because women felt good, it was a prosperous time. On the stock exchange, they'll tell you in good times when the money's flowing, you can tell from the hemlines of where the women's hemlines where the economy is. And so, basically what women are doing is revealing more leg when the men have more money is what's happening. So in a feel-good time of prosperity after the war, then that led to the baby boomers, but it was hormonal, far more than demographics or something about the logistics.
Yes, in the concentration camps, women had no period, no ovulation.
Yeah, because your body knows that you're under stress and you're in a place where you
hunger. In the hunter-gatherers, hunger would stop ovulation, so that therefore you wouldn't have children because you'd be hungry. You couldn't feed them, so there was ovulation.
A woman's body is very keyed into the natural environment, so it knows that this, because you don't want to invest in kids and stuff that don't have a future. So I think hunter-gatherers were self-regulating, and now what's happening is that we are hunter-gatherers, and women are doing some self-regulation. So this is not a good place to introduce kids into, and I think that's been happening since the 80s. And I think it's not. I feel the bulimia and anorexia nervosa, those eating disorders and stuff that are sexually related, it's not women malfunctioning. They're actually functioning correctly. What's happening is that our society is sending them signals that now those same signals, a lot of the things like depression is not a disease. A depression is healthy. And what women are depressed now because this is not a good environment to bring up kids. There are too many people, and I believe that you have a hormonal sensing of population too, and women can start to feel that there are too many people, and then their bodies will self-regulate. And I think that's more or less what's happening. So, but it starts to get a bit evil is when the alien cortex comes in. Well, so far this is all natural in the mammalian brain. Then you have these girls now that are feeling depressed. They're at home. They're on, social media with an iPhone, getting more and more depressed. This is good. What's not good is they're connected to social media and the alien cortex. And what people are doing on social media is they're forming a cult, saying the reason why you're feeling that is maybe your ego is wrong. Maybe your ego identity is wrong, and you really are a man. And then you get into, big pharma is very quick to get into one of these trends. Now, what liberals don't know is under the undercurrent, the first time liberals and your grandma hears about LGBTQ thing, that they hear it because their grandson comes out as gay, and they say, well, we won't have grandkids, and we're very sorry, but we love Johnny and stuff, and they now, there's another side to this that liberals don't know. And then what's been going on in the counterculture, in the trans culture, was since the gender euphoria of the 80s, there's been a castration cult that's been growing. And now this is very relevant to Sibylle. Sibylle is the Magna Mater and the Mother Goddess. And if you have a look up, basically what she's famous for is a relationship to Attis. So Attis and the story of Attis. Attis castrated himself for the sake of Cybele. And Cybele was the patron goddess in Rome before Christianity. And St. Peter is a usurper. He sits on Cybele's throne in her temple. The Vatican is her temple. That's why it's built like a freaking womb in a temple at the time. It's hers, it's not his. So he's a usurper. And now her adherents, her cult, the cult of Cybele, they called Galli, and they made themselves eunuchs. And you say, well, I think we should go into the psychology of this because it's important for the trans community today and why there's an epidemic of self-castration, which is what's going on here. So, first of all, what liberals don't know is in the counterculture movement, especially in the gay clubs of the 80s, the gay clubs in the 80s were devastated, absolutely devastated by AIDS. And I don't think the middle class knew how bad it was, but it was wiped out. I mean, the gay scene in London went from absolutely thriving to, asparagus patch. And because so many guys died, particularly, gay guys died, it turned it from the opposite. I think the whole gay scene turned from the very opposite from gay. It turns into a very apocalyptic kind of cult. And part of that, I can't help feeling that castrations came in there. So what happened was all the way through after 2000 and the last 2 decades, before you had all these gender clinics, where these gender clinics arose from was in the gay clubs. You would have these guys who they called cutters, basically. So what would happen in the gay scene is that these guys would get fascinated by the idea of castration. There were a bunch of guys, you couldn't go to a hospital or a doctor or go to the NHS or anything and get a sex change operation. So what the guys would do was there was a whole lot of backyard castration. So these cutter guys would, some of them would run into the thousands. And it's important to go into what's going on in these kind of backroom ceremonies, which now Big Pharma has stepped in, cashed in on. And in the gender clinics are doing the same thing now, but now they go to the, diagnostic sorcery manual, which is just a billing codes for insurance. As long as you get gender dysphoria in there, then you can have it billed to insurance. Then it's big money. Then they make an industry. Then they start promoting it. They start getting money to propagate the LGBTQ cult. But it's for profit, and it's not very good for anybody because this is not a cult that can breed other than copying people by mind. So it basically captures people's minds and their mindset, and it has to be active in that kind of recruitment to keep it going and to keep the cult growing. Now, those cutters, okay, so what the hell is going on there? Now, to the average guy, including me, you can't imagine anything worse than having your balls cut off. So why do these guys go and do it? It just seems like absolutely horrible. And a large part of the reaction on the right is there's this huge pressure to say, oh, you should be accepting of people. And I have to say, well, yeah, I mean, that's very nice for a trans person. But the trans people, I've never seen a trans person that gives a shit about the horror that this, doing this to yourself induces in a healthy male. So it's incredibly one-sided and selfish, and this is all about me and my journey of self-discovery and stuff, and fuck you and the rest of the world. And you say, like, yeah, you can't hurt my feelings by not using the right gender pronoun. And say, do you know what it does to my feelings that you cut your balls off? I can barely stay in your presence in case I catch the disease. So if you say about, you know, that now men are scared that it is an infectious disease. And it is. If you go back at Catullus wrote a poem about Sibyllionatus, and he ends the poem. I struggled very, very hard to understand Sibyllionatus, but I think I eventually got it. But the key to why Attis castrated himself is very, very apropos for today. And eventually got it, and I believe it's what Catullus said. He said it straight out. He said, Attis mutilated himself out of hatred of Venus, i.e. Cybele. And he ends the poem by saying, you know, keep this away from me, for God's sake, don't let me go down that path, giving you a clear indication that Catullus himself is horrified by the act of self-mutilation, but can see the attraction of it too. So what the hell is going on here? Well, it's closely bound to Eros and Thanatos. And it's pure Thanatos to try and stop yourself propagating, to end your line. You know, you've got 4.3 million years of people passing on, you know, basically sacrificing themselves for their children in this chain ladder that we've passed on, and then you just unequivocally come and say it stops here. I have thousands and thousands of ancestors, and they are disappointed in me. I will not propagate. It is an effort of finality and death that is very strong. Now that is not unattractive. It's Thanatos. Everybody has a death wish in them to a certain extent. But but that's one aspect of it. But there's also an aspect of like self-reinforcement, like tinnitus. I've always thought that tinnitus is an obsessive reaction. So you start, everybody can hear the blood in their ears. And at some stage, if you listen carefully enough, you can start to hear and you notice it. Once you notice it, you start saying, oh, I can hear it. It sounds louder. You reinforce it. Something similar happened to me with a girlfriend. I had an Asian girlfriend who said she wouldn't use any toothpaste on a toothbrush. And I asked her, why? And she said, no, toothpaste makes me gag. And I said to her, well, how can toothpaste make you gag? That's ridiculous. And the next time I was brushing my teeth, I went, how can that make you gag? And I went, suddenly I tasted the toothpaste in the back of my throat, and I went, and I went, oh shit. Now, to this day, every time I brush my teeth, I have to concentrate. If I lose concentration, I go, and it's because of her. She just said that once. So the autosuggestion, as soon as I saw it, I started reinforcing it. Now, a lot of that is going on with these guys, but not so much the girls, the guys. So, for example, I'll give you one example of this guy who I heard of, and he said why he got a sex change operation. Okay, first of all, your grandma thinks, oh, you know, this is a guy who wants to be a girl. Not so much. I haven't met a lot of guys that want to be girls. A lot of it is alienation from their body, and then particularly to their genitals. So, you know, they can, there's a thing, V.S. Ramachandran has done a lot of research into like phantom limbs, and I can't remember what it's called, apopprognosia, something like that. But it's really people that are absolutely convinced that their arm or some limb is not theirs. And they can even draw a line exactly where it is. And they insist on having that arm amputated. And it's a body disorder. It's quite rare, but it's, you know, they can find fascinating things about neurology out of studying this. Now, this same effect you can get on your genitals. You start looking at your genitals thinking, you know, these are the way I am for a man. These are the things how I'm trapped by sibling. I'm attracted to women, but I know they're going to get me, domesticate me, put a ring on my finger, take all my freedom, and you'll be sucked in and you'll be just absorbed into this black hole in this cocoon where she's going to keep you like Delilah. Delilah and Samson, what is the cutting of the hair in Delilah? And it's a euphemism for basically cutting your balls off. It's basically women, you know, the part of being a primate for gender relations is for a female to keep the male sexually satisfied. And the reason is to stop him straying and keep him on a leash. So men can feel this leash very strongly. They want to basically spread their seeds like Johnny Appleseed. And the woman wants them basically to stay in the home and be a slave. The women are the first slave owners. So men want to be free, but they're attracted, hugely attracted to Sibylle and to women. And that can become a focus in people's genitals, say that this is my leash. This, if I didn't have balls, I'd be free. So basically they get caught up in the thing that, you know, I can't live with women, I can't kill them. Now that's kind of dissonance between not being able to be trapped, but, you know, wanting to be free, but not being able to be free. And that this indecision and this ambivalence can become such a burden that it can become focused on, say, your genitals, where you say, like, this is the source of the problem. I wouldn't be attracted to them. I wouldn't, you know, need to stray. I would be free of this whole issue. And it becomes that kind of thing. Now, I believe that we're supposed to be in this ambivalent state. It's wrong to think in terms of a solution, to think in terms of, well, it should be like this. No, it should be that way. I believe what it is because we're hunter-gatherers, and men are supposed to not be comfortable in the home or outside. They're supposed to be kept, you know, between the two. They're supposed to go out on the hunt. They're supposed to come back from the hunt and, you know, and be attracted to the home. But then, you know, all these marriage counselors and that are operating from the principle that we should all be happy and healthy and live together as couples in a nuclear family. It's like, no, we're hunter-gatherers. What they're trying to do is completely artificial, and it's basically part of our industrial slave culture. Men are supposed to go out of the house, go out hunting and stuff and bring back the meat. But we, you know, now we force people into a home and we don't give them any outlet. So we don't let men go to make a killing in the city because that's been taken over by women, and they're all hunting and gathering around the offices while he's like, we need to, you know, conquer the world and make a killing. And all the women are saying, yeah, they're so masculine and patriarchy. And, you know, so the guy can't do his job, which is hunting in the office. That's been taken away from him. And so what men do is they start going out and they're doing fishing. And basically you'll find a lot of men, any place you go to, in, say, in Greece, which is changing slowly, you can find a lot of guys sitting in, you know, fishing, and he's saying, like, any one of them, I know what they're doing. So they're just escaping the wife. They don't give her, you can see they don't give a shit about the fishing. They never catch anything, and they're hour upon hour. They're guys out in boats and doing all of this shit. And the reason is they're supposed to be out hunting, and there's no hunting ground. So modern civilization's taken away the hunting grounds. In the 60s, they could go into the office. Men could go to the office and get all the adrenaline out, and in this kind of masculine way. And they would say it was in the language, you know, I made a killing in the city and stuff. And then, you know, that was what men felt work was, but that's kind of been taken away. You're not allowed to see the work as that. You have to see it like from the woman's point of view, which is, men and women have to, the reason why there's such problem in the workspace and employments and stuff is because men and women are using they mean different things when they mean work. So work for a man is conquering. It's like going out and bringing down an antelope or a mammoth and then bringing it back and feasting on it and feeling really good and having a kip and a screw and a kip. And then that's not what work is for women. When women go into the workplace, they're hunter-gatherers. They think it's convivial. We must be all nice. The mammalian brain wants to share because of the brood. It's very important in a brood that you don't you don't have favorites and you keep everything nice. And so women think in terms of, if you see women doing business, even a woman CEO, they think of it as going out and gathering and finding opportunities and bringing them back and then sharing, and then they want equality of wages and stuff. And for men, so like, it doesn't seem right in their brains, because equality in their wage packet is like whoever can bring down the biggest mammoth gets the prestige and basically gets the meat and basically gets to screw the best woman. And so that's what we evolved to do. Now that's taken away by saying, no, if you do, the same work, you get the same pay packet. Well, yeah, I mean, first of all, the work you're talking about is a substitute for what we're really talking about. And that's, in the male term, that's hunting. And in the female term, that's gathering. So already there's a mismatch now. The hunting and gathering has been distorted into marketing or some shit like that, or project management or something. It's a false substitute for what we're really supposed to be doing. And then women say, well, we should have equal outcome. What you do after you do pick all the berries is you stick them all in a communal basket, and everybody shares. They have a potlatch and shares. So that's what the mammalian brain is telling you to do. And so it's unworkable. They tell you the modern work environment and the industrial work environment is unworkable. We're hunter-gatherers, and we're not suited for this. And all these debates about equal pay and stuff is like, all it's saying is, guys, this doesn't work. There's no resolution to this, because the problem is in our neurology. You're taking millions of years of evolution, and you're saying you cannot substitute the modern environment for our hunter-gatherer. It is not an adequate replacement. And the result is we're taking all these things on the nose personally. One of the ways people are taking it personally is in this ego identity, and particularly women now, they're feeling this all fucked up. And what their bodies are saying is, in a fucked up environment like this is not a good place to bring up kids. They are absolutely right. Their body's working tip-top. And now, pharma and stuff is coming in and saying, no, there's solutions. You can alter your gender. It's because, you've got to look at your ego or something like that, and so okay. So let's go back to the cudders and stuff in clubs. Now, what is happening there is, I'll give you one example of one story I heard of. And this is the tinnitus thing of how you can become obsessed with your own genitals and them as a threat or a problem to you, a life problem. And instead of dealing with the psychology of, sexual attraction and repulsion and gender relations, you focus that into, say, this is a huge ball of wax that I cannot cope with. You focus that, say, look, if I didn't have genitals, the problem would be gone. I would be neuter. If I was neuter, I wouldn't have to get into sexual dimorphism. I wouldn't have to have relationships that were sexual. I could have, I could have intellectual relationships that would just be done at the level of the alien cortex. So the alien cortex is telling you a lie, and it's saying, this is something I cannot take the other four brain layers and all this shit. So I'm going to deal with it. I'm going to deal with it by cutting basically the power and the engine of, say, your amygdala or your reptilian brain. And to do that, you alter your gender, and particularly for a male, you castrate yourself. So now, once you start thinking in terms of that kind of limb dysphoria as your genitals as alien to yourself and a problem, you very quickly get into the issue of life and death. It's a life and death issue whether you actually procreate or not. So here's the story. Here's the story about this one guy. So one guy, he said that he did gender surgery because it goes back to when he was a kid on a bus. And he said he was standing on a bus, and you know, all the kids were swaying backwards and forwards, and there was this big psychopathic bully, and he fell backwards into the guy and pissed him off. So the bully grabbed the guy by the nuts and squeezed them and said, like, he said, "Do that once more, arsehole, and I'll crush him." And see, now that act is evil, and it's evil because it's focused the guy's attention in a way that is, you know, basically, think of it. He's put under threat by a bully, life or death threat. Everything in his brain is saying, this gorilla is going to kill me. And basically, what the bully has done is focused it on his genitals. So he's saying, like, it's like using a taser on somebody. And if you go back to the videos a while back that I did with the grab him by the pussy, this is I mentioned all this about Trump. He was doing the same thing to a woman by grabbing by the pussy. It's got nothing to do with sex. It's got to do with power and control. So basically what you're doing is tasing somebody in the crotch. It's very easy to grab somebody by the crotch and give them a shock, a powerful psychological shock. It's as good as an electric shock. In fact, I have mentioned this too, in some ashrams in India and stuff, at a certain point in your spiritual development, the guru might walk up to you and grab your nuts, and basically it'll send you completely into transcendence. Now, what's happening there is he's arousing Kundalini. So basically there's a lot of energy in terms of, you know, the nervous system and the sacrum bone and all these nerves that go up. And we talked about all of that. But you can awaken Kundalini in somebody just by grabbing their nuts or grab them by the pussy. And Trump found his way to that. Is almost certainly a psychopath that's pushing the boundaries can find those kind of buttons. And it's horrendous that he broke so many social taboos to find his way to that one. But now, after this guy on the bus who had that, he couldn't get the thought of, you know, basically of sexual arousal whenever he thinks of his nuts being crushed by this guy. So does that make any sense to people, or do I need to go into why? You see that it's a power relation, and it basically what it's focusing all his attention into life and death, into basically his nuts. So every time he thinks about that, it's like tinnitus. It's self-reinforcing. So he becomes obsessed by his own nuts. So going back to the cutters, right? So what happens, and this is important for liberals who like, LGBTQ, to understand the psychology of what's going on here. What happens in the dark rooms where these cutters are, is these guys, like, say, this guy on the bus, would then be gender dysphoric. Not you're already distorted. The bully on the bus has done is already distorted and made him changed, say, a sexual attraction, which is quite different, into a power relation. So what the bully has done is fused sex and power in one thing, just by grabbing him by the nuts. You see, if you grab him by the nuts, is powerless. So it's kind of the same as rape. It's showing the guy, I have ultimate control over you. I have control of life and death over you because it's your progeny. It's the core and essence of a man that is testicles. So just take the word testicles, right? When people testify, they put their hands here. If you testify before the Lord, you go like this. Now, what people don't understand the symbolism. Testify comes from the ancient Rome. It's saying it's from testes. And what you're saying is, with your hand up like this, is not saying hand before God. This is saying, I will cut my nuts off. So it says, if you're taking a blood oath on your genitals, you're saying, with this knife, I will cut my genitals. And that's what you're doing when you testify. So that's kind of lost in our culture. But it shows you that basically, if you're taking a life oath on saying, I will not I will not procreate. I will end my line. In fact, I will die in my body, and I will no longer be a viable human organism if I break this oath. And that's what you're doing. That's why you should never testify. You never testify. That's why they put it in the Extinctionati thing. You never take an oath, never make a contract. What you're doing is a version of that. You're bonding yourself to say, I will cut the nuts off my future self if I break this oath. And you say like, man. So that's what the guy's doing. He's basically on the bus, the bully is forcing him to testify. He's saying, I have power over you. If you disrespect me by falling on me again in this bus, I will basically kill you, is in essence what he's saying. Worse than kill you. Most men would rather die than have their nuts cut off. There are very often people that are about to go into surgery for having an orodectomy or something, they'll kill themselves. As you ask anybody in a hospital, they'll tell you that. So this is a hell of a thing. And you think, now let's go to the cutters in these little rooms doing this little ceremony. Now that guy on the bus, it becomes a huge obstacle, and his whole existential thing is really focused on his nuts. Now, when he goes into the cutter, he's really committing suicide. So really, that burden of control from the bully is basically the bully's avenue to control him is his nuts. So if you follow the crude logic of it, is if he can lose his nuts, he would lose the bully would lose control of him, right? Does that make all sense? It's basically you'd be free from the power relationship because it was established around his biggest fear. So, but it's also a kind of case of the whole situation is completely intolerable, psychologically intolerable. The mere fact that there are people that can walk up to you and take control of you is intolerable for a human being to live under that threat. So it becomes a way out is a kind of a suicide. So you can either commit suicide or you can cut your nuts off. They're both kind of equivalent. But anyway, you get the idea that, like tinnitus, the more the guy thinks about this, the more he gets obsessed about it. The more he thinks about, having his nuts cut off, the bigger erotic thrill it gives him, a psycho-erotic thrill it gives him. And eventually he will be in a club talking to other guys, and they will start saying, hey, oh, Jim, if you want it done, Jim does it. Now, this is what Jim's going to do. So Jim is kind of like the psychopath. Jim's he's cut the nuts off about 50 guys. And what he does is he has an orgasm. He gets a sexual thrill out of castrating guy. Why? Because it's his death coping mechanism. See, if he's making a sacrificial lamb out of these other guys. He's basically saying, if I sacrifice your nuts, that saves my nuts. And he's getting a sexual thrill out of it. So now both these guys in a little back room, they get a sexual thrill out of it. Now what you'll see a lot of guys obsessing about it. I saw something, in that Derek Jensen video, that woman was talking about, hey, this guy, I can't remember, some celebrity YouTube influencer, and he has a pre-castration party with everybody around. Now that is very, very close to the Hilaria with Sibylle, right? So this today is the Hilaria and the day of joy. It's basically the day of blood is the day after the guys have cut their nuts off. It's the day of joy because then they're free. They're no longer in the game. The game is, can I progenate? So they're no longer in the Darwinian game, and they're free of it. So that they, getting a huge amount of joy. They're the living dead, of course. And it doesn't really work as a strategy. It doesn't work biologically. It doesn't turn out like they think. But going back to the guys, the cutter guys, the more obsessed they get about this thing, they're getting an erotic high out of it. They're becoming erotically obsessed with the whole. Again, it's like suicide. If you see about guys who commit suicide, therapists and that will tell you that they get obsessed with the way of suicide. So killing yourself is an abstract thing. Nobody, just decides to kill themselves. They get obsessed by a way. They get obsessed by a bridge or a gun, and it reinforces itself. And so they'll start, if it's a bridge, they'll start seeing, the apophenia. They'll start seeing references to bridges and messages to bridges, and more stuff that they interpret as jump off the bridge. And so it gets self-reinforcing. And the same with people that think of pills or guns or ropes or something like that. It's, they become obsessed with that mechanism because it's self-reinforcing. So these guys are doing something similar. The more they think about castration, the more they getting into that mode of suicide. Now, this is very deep, because we have everybody has a natural inclination to self-transformation. We are almost like snakes in a way, that we do kind of shed our skin of our youth and metamorphosize. And it's built into our psychology. It should be built into our culture, but it's not. We've lost it. But the idea of maturing into puberty, into maturing and transforming from like a pupa stage to a butterfly stage is built into us biologically and psychologically. And so this is a subsummation of it. What's happening in this culture is the culture of transformation is being distorted and put into this kind of thing. It's saying the transformation is a death. It's the death of the old self, the youth, and the emergence into the adult. So it is a very, very real death, but it gets distorted into these things like suicide. And then it becomes focused with an object like a gun or castration. Now, it's charged, massively charged, sexually charged, and sexually powerful. So what often the guys will do that are going to go through this, they become obsessed with the orgasm. So what happens is both guys, the cutter and the guy having his nuts cut off, has an orgasm. They basically, how it's done is the guy, puts a elastic band around the guy's nuts, takes him to orgasm, and at the point of orgasm, the blade comes and cuts him off. And that's what's happening with Sibyllinatus. That's what the Galli did in ancient Rome in those festivals. This is the day they did it. This is why it's so terrible. So, but you see, when you hear of that, if you're a normal guy, you go, oh my God, you're just about faint. The blood runs out of you. But you think of it from this guy's point of view, is he's getting more and more of a charge out of it. Eventually, this becomes a focus of his life. Sophie, did you faint? do you want to come up for air?
No, I didn't faint. Don't worry. I was just getting the dog outside. So basically that's. But you see, the guys become more and more focused on, this is. Maybe I should wait for Sophie to get back, because she should probably.
That just sounds brutal. Yeah, so
it does, but you see, you have to see it from the point of view of it's the rapture. It becomes a substitute for rapture, and it becomes a substitute. So what's supposed to happen is you're supposed to go through this mental transformation and psychological transformation, and it is that potent. But if it gets deviated, and this is where it gets very deep. So, I've talked about Makyo and stuff before, but this is the worst form of Makyo. And what the alien cortex increasingly, why you see it happen more and more in civilized society, is because as we get, civilization is part of the alien cortex, its environment, it's its home territory. It's doing niche creation and creating an environment that's best suited for propagation of alien cortex. So, but what it's doing is substituting this transformation that will kill your alien cortex it's saying, no, don't kill me, kill my balls, or something like that. So it's a sacrifice, just like Isaac. So Isaac, is ready to sacrifice his son. What Isaac is doing, he's supposed to sacrifice himself, his alien cortex. But instead, he goes like, I'm not killing myself. Fuck that. So Makyo, he substitutes his son for himself. Is saying like, well, I love my son almost as much as myself. So let's say it's a 99%. Okay, if I kill my son and offer him to God, the alien cortex, I'm off the hook. Okay, that's the psychology. And then in the Bible, then the angel stays Isaac's hand, and he said like, and then is like, yeah, because what the angel stay is his mammalian brain that's saying, dude, you can't kill your own son for the alien cortex. Don't do it. And so
Was that
yeah.
Abraham?
Oh, Abraham.
Oh, yeah.
Abraham and Isaac. Isaac is the one who's going to get the chop.
Yes.
Anyway, you can see how traumatized Isaac's going to be out of this. There ain't no good coming out of this story. So there's this traumatized kid. He's got this little kid who's going to, imagine what's the psychology of near death that he's giving this kid a near death experience. Of course, Abraham doesn't give a fuck because he's an alien cortex and a psychopath. And he doesn't give a shit about the trauma he's putting his son in. It's just about him and his religion. He's almost like a trans person. It's like, this is about me and my God and, fuck my son and what I'm putting through and his feelings. I'm going to do this for my alien cortex and my ego. And he's just about to stick the knife, and luckily his mammalian brain steps in and he says, oh, an angel saved me. Too right, an angel saved me. I mean, but psychology, Isaac's fucked, and read the rest of the Bible.
Did you watch that animation by Nina Pelly? The sadomasochism video posted on Reddit. And there's a lot of references to that in it.
Well, this is how you perpetuate trauma, and this is what they're doing. And then what do? They go and get a goat. So in other words, okay, we got rid of the son, but we're still doing substitution, and we substitute a scapegoat, and all well and good, and that's the Passover, whatever the blasted festival is.
I must say that for a woman, what you're talking about seems to be very alien to me, from my point of view.
Yeah,
because
for good reason. If this wasn't alien to you, we would go extinct.
As a doctor, I've seen a lot of things, and I've looked after a lot of mutilated men. And not women.
Well, hopefully I'm giving you an insight. You see,
I must say that they are totally taken hostage by the pharmaceutical for life, and that they are going to be in hospitals for life. They're going to have high risks of. We had to screen men who had been castrated for their normal problems of prostate, but we also had to screen them for breast cancer because they were taking hormones. And
I don't want to get into the consequences too much. I just want to help you understand the psychology. It should feel alien to you because basically, if you understood any of this, it wouldn't be good for our species. If women understood this naturally, our species would die out. There's some knowledge you're not supposed to have.
Yes, but I brought up a question in the comments under the meeting from my gender point of view, or gender, or what I am, is that I was interested also in the aspects that you had talked about with Hank in the video that you did nearly a year and a half ago, where you were talking about the 5-layered brain, and you were talking about the gender-based amygdala and all these things. And I don't think we'll have time to bring this up today, but maybe one day we could. I could look into it a bit, but I would be very interested, especially in the work that we're doing with spirituality and the work we're doing with. You talk about Kundalini, you talk about all these things, and from my point of view, I hear a lot of things that are coming from another species, the male species, and I don't. It's I like it. It's part of what we're learning and everything, but it is very, very alien.
Yeah, but you see, what hopefully what I'm doing is I'm giving you a fly on the wall look into the guy's locker room, and into the guy's mind, even more than guys will admit to in the locker room, right? So this is stuff guys know, but you can only go so far even in locker room talk. So basically we have what you can say in mixed company. Then you can say what you can have is say just guys. Then you can say what guys in the locker room, and then maybe guys in the shower. When it got a bit dodgy. But they beyond that, I'm talking about stuff that guys know that can't maybe talk to their therapist or something. So, but I feel it's important to surface all of these things, and I think we should understand them all now.
You were not going to talk about consequences, but have you encountered men who have been castrated, who underwent castration voluntarily, and have they expressed regret?
Yes,
afterwards?
It's very common. You see, one of the reasons is that there are often complications. You see, these surgeries and that don't go. If what these guys go, most guys, they get focused on the act. So they get focused on the orgasm and having the biggest orgasm, and they don't think about what happens afterwards. A few do, and they get into the gender aspects, and they start, cross-dressing and stuff, and getting into the feminine role. But like they go to a point where this is the final act, and then they think, oh, then I'll be a woman, and they're not expecting that they will have a gaping gash that never heals for the rest of their life between their legs, and then that's something which the gay community never told them. Sorry, we never went into that one. And so there's a lot of misinformation, and so it's a cult thing. But we've gone into the situation where you can't say anything about LGBTQ thing because it's one of the cults. You've got to respect the cults. so we, every now and then these cults come up, and Sibyllies came up in Rome, and if you said anything up against Cybele and the Galli and stuff, you'd be in serious trouble. Then Christians came along, and the pendulum swung the other way, and if you were a Galli, there would be real trouble. So the Christian, so I want to go deeper into the psychology of this, and particularly in Cybele and stuff. So now, Christianity in general has had a problem with people self-castrating. It's one of the things that they don't talk much about. But from the early church, it's the psychology of Christian transformation was also a distortion. They're taking the shamanic transformation and saying you have to be reborn again in Christ. So there's another fucking cult. He says you have to be reborn again as a woman and find your authentic self. And you have to be reborn again in Christ and find yourself as an authentic Christian. And everybody's got their story of how you have to be reborn again as, wait for it, spoiler alert, my ego. Yay! Why is it always we're there for you? We're going to do the transformation, and what's going to happen at the end? You're going to be me. And it's like, oh, thanks for all this altruism. Are you not doing this just to reinforce your own ego, reinforce your own fucked up choice, trying to expand the mistake so it doesn't look so much like I'm saying? None of that, right? No, of course not.
You're 100% right, because I've dealt with a lot of people in the aftermath of such atrocious operations, and their reinforcement of the ego is absolutely, it's just in front of you. I've experienced that more than a dozen times in them, and it's just, you're in front of a citadel, a thing that is just...
More than a citadel, it's a universe unto itself.
Yeah.
So you see, what as breeders or fertile people that are in the line of progeny and this huge ancestry, this family tree that goes forward, we are connected to the universe and the earth. We are very part of the material world. Now, emphasis on mater, the prima mater. The prima mater is the Roman word for Cybele. So the word material, when we say we are materialists, we say we are in mater's world, mother material, mother mater. So we are connected to the. It's like Kevin says. He says, like, you're never going to understand this stuff unless you have fur in the game. I think the guys think I'm Jewish atheist gay or something. So, according to that, the way those guys think. But I said, I said in Discord, they're like saying, no, I've got fur in the game. I've got 2 kids. Kind of baffling for them, I guess. But you see, if you have kids, you've got a stake in the game. You're not. You see, you can't. You lose your ego by having kids. You have to, unless you're a complete bastard, you have to transfer some of your ego, some of your wealth, some of your energy, some of your dreams. It's some of yourself goes into this child, and that's what having children is all about. Is you give up some of yourself to propagate yourself as somebody else, and it's not only biology; it's also psychology. It's finance. It's in every way. Now, what these people are saying is we're not in that game anymore. So we're not in this universe. We're not in the universal game, Mother Marta's game, Leela. We're out of the simulation. We are an island unto ourselves. We're not going to propagate. We don't care about, the world's overpopulated. There are too many people. We're actually misanthropic now. And what we care about is this universe. And this universe is me. And so it happened it's what happens to eunuchs. If you go back to China and you see the guys that made themselves eunuchs so that they could serve as officials to the emperor. The emperor accepted them as eunuchs because they wouldn't be a threat. The idea was they wouldn't be a threat because you couldn't screw his concubine and stuff. And so then they thought, well, if you don't have a dynasty, you can't be a threat to the king or the emperor. But they were wrong, because what happens with a eunuch is they become their own dynasty and they become self-obsessed. So in so many ways, I mean, I've got trans friends and stuff. There's this common theme which is well known if you read in the history of eunuchs and stuff, is that they become obsessed with food and with chocolate and with their own enjoyment. And what happened in ancient China was they became notoriously corrupt, and they took all the wealth from the emperor, and they built palaces, and they loved all these, kind of really enjoyments of life. Basically they loved all these hedonistic indulgences, and it got to a stage where there's a story where the emperor couldn't understand why the empire was falling apart, and some crafty astrologer told him, well, you should climb up to the stupa and survey the land, and basically knowing that from the stupa he could see all the palaces of all his eunuchs, which he never knew about. He never knew that they were taking all his wealth and building their own palaces. He thought he was in the clear because they didn't have a dynasty. But what he didn't realize, they became their own dynasty. And that's what most trans people will do. They become inordinately selfish. They can empathize a bit with other trans people in the cult. But in essence, they are a closed universe that is not going to propagate. So it's a closed universe that is not... that has no outlet or future. And so guys on the far right, like Kevin, they often go about how nihilistic it is. And it is nihilistic because it's a knowing terminus. So those eunuchs in China, they did that because they did a cost benefit assessment with the alien cortex. And they said, like, a lot of them will say, like, I gave up one pleasure, which is sex, so that I could have many pleasures and be rich and be like one of these court eunuchs. If you see the eunuchs today, I think they were maybe not long ago, maybe I think in the 80s, the last imperial eunuch died. And I remember seeing something where they interviewed him and they said, are you sorry for that? And he said, yes, because he said, that was the bargain I made. And he said, like, now I'm old, I have no family, and I'm going to die. I'm the last of my family, I'm the last of my line, and I'm alone. And so I regret it. And you say, well, that's it. That's, you know, he made himself into this closed universe. But you see this. You see how terrible this is. That these gender clinics, before these kids have reached the age of maturity, they are putting themselves into this position. It's a crime of monumental proportions.
Yeah.
I have a request. Could we continue the subject next week on this issue too? Because we haven't covered all the comments that Gary brought up, and also some of the questions I had, because we won't have much time. We've already been an hour and 20 minutes nearly into the thing.
Okay.
Would that be okay? That we?
This is a long thing. I mean, could take.
I
10
know.
years.
Personally, I'd like to. I don't know. I'd like to get a few questions ready a bit more to get more, from my point of view, because there's one man speaking here. There's 1, 2, 3 men there and 2 women, and we're really on 2 different planes. And it would be interesting to exchange. It's great. Like, I mean, this is, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I also might have a.
I don't know how we can do this from a woman's point of view too. You see, I don't know, because we don't do that between women. It's so many things are obvious, and I don't know. It's like, yeah, yeah.
I think that these things are obvious to women, but men don't know that. You know that.
Oh yes.
Yeah, I've obviously missed most of the conversation, but I think I made a comment before when we talked like a long time ago in Desiderata about art with the Mona Lisa. So when I was in high school, wasn't happy. I'm not going to go through all that and how miserable it was, but there's that assignment where we had to do a self-portrait. And I remember it was just an emotional swirl, it was sad, happy, it was like a roller coaster ride painting that. So I painted myself as a female wolf in a cage because that self-portrait, I was looking with more than my eyes, was like my emotion. Everyone drew themselves as, their normal self. They brought a photo in, painted their own face. But I drew myself as a female white wolf in a cage. And I think if there's like some really prolific, internet narrative about transness, I probably could have got fucked up. But the fact that I thought to myself as a teenager that if I told people, like, if I put a narrative to it, no one would understand because, most people are Christian and stuff and all that. The fact that I was alone and I would then put a narrative to that, I think that saved me. The fact that I was lonely and no one, and I didn't tell like a Christian or a psychologist this. I think the fact, yeah.
What you're saying is exactly what I wanted to bring up next time. It's the negation, and Hugh has brought this up too, the negation of gender fluidity that exists naturally in us as hunter-gatherers and as fucked up civilized people. There is a gender fluidity that is not acknowledged in education and in life, in real life, in schools and everything. And that is the door open.
Yeah, yeah.
You see?
Yeah. Yeah, and so
the thing is, go ahead.
So with that whole experience, not once did I even think about changing my body, though. That's the thing. The changing my body never occurred to me. It was just this experience that I couldn't describe.
But you see, you're supposed to explore gender. It's part of being a human being, and just being a functional human being is to explore gender. So people should know what the other gender is about and then gravitate towards some gender or other. It naturally winds up being, say, 1 in 20 or something like that will decide that they're gay or something like that. Now, that is natural. The problem is it's being hijacked now by the alien cortex. So all of these things are now in this natural process of discovery. The interests are financial interests, big pharma, the therapeutic industry, the cult of LGBTQ is trying to recruit, and so they're all these things that have nothing to do with the individual and everything to do with all these ulterior motives and alternative interests.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
So we need to say, get back to what do kids need? And I'd say kids need a vehicle for shamanic self-transformation. They need the room to be able to explore genders. And I think Kevin is right that there need to be role models. This whole gender fluidity is different from gender confusion. So you are almost deliberately causing mixed messages. Our school system does it. Just the fact that they have, you could have, it's a potluck, whether you have a male tutor or female tutor or something like that. It's like, it's not supposed to matter. Well, it matters hugely. In other cultures, if you go and learn Japanese, it's like, I learned Japanese from, well, I started learning, I didn't get very far, but I learned Japanese from a woman. Nobody told me that. I didn't understand. I tried to start talking Japanese to men. They just fell about laughing. And I couldn't understand why. And then they told me, well, you can't get a woman to do. Basically, it came across a man with like, I was like, I'm so fucking gay, I was like a flamboyant queen, and they were like killing themselves laughing. And there was I didn't know. I was a Westerner, like, it's a language. So like, no, but it's terribly, terribly important that which role models you put up. So it's like cats, as they develop, they know that there are definite points that they get to in their development. Some are a window of about a week. If you don't let a kitten run after a ball in this narrow window of about a week, it'll never be able to see a ball. It'll have blind sight. So but we're doing this to our kids, but we at crucial times when they're supposed to be doing stuff that's structured by the tribe and gender role. There's a definite point where kids should encounter sex and stuff like this and be exposed to violence and blood and sex and death and if you delay them, they're terrible consequences, or if you fudge them, they're terrible consequences. And we just ignore it. We just say, like, you're going to spend 8 hours a day with this woman, and she's going to teach you how the world is. And you say, like, well, it'd be fucking, what kind of a misogynist are you? So it's like, that's a crucial point in a boy's life. We've been told all sorts of shit and just getting demeanor of how you're supposed to deal with a threat or aggression or something. And it's like, it's not so much what the teacher's saying in words. They're taking cues and bodily cues, and it goes all the way down to pheromones. So it's like, this is so fucked up. I'm just amazed our culture isn't more fucked up than it is. But we should be putting kids allowing kids to explore, but actually having a normal setting for them to discover, what gender role they actually, settle down in. But anyway, yeah.
Next week, continue this, or?
Yeah, sure. Okay, should we carry on next week?
Yes, I think people have been, because of the interview with Lear, we've been glued for 3 hours maybe.
Oh, yeah. Okay, too long. All right.
Yeah, I think it's an important conversation to have because I have like internet trans friends, and I don't know how to talk to them about this without getting my head chopped off. So
yeah, it's a religious war now. You can't talk about it.
yeah.
Can I just say something? I think people should focus on their personalities instead of what they look like. Like, so they look, so they're male and they feel like they're female. So big deal. Or you're female and you feel like you're male. So big deal. So doesn't make you any better than me and doesn't make me better than you. It just makes you a human being. So what?
Well, the thing is the transformation is a transformation from ego. So it's the really dangerous thing is we're getting into all these ego identifications. So they're not working, and they're being reinforced, and they're getting to the stage where they're being manipulated by psyops and political entities, and it's basically we've gone way too far in this culture. For it's considering we're just chimps. It's just abuse from every angle. But the only way out is to stop ego identification, to try and transcend the ego. So we've got a choice. We can either go back to hunter-gatherers and then you return to tribal life and try and restore those, which people try and do by going off-grid, and it never works. Or you can forge ahead to the shamanic transformation, which means you get over your ego.
I am sorry, I'm going to have to leave you. I've got
Yeah.
something.
Oh,
Well,
we're
we're
about to
now.
go. Yeah.
Are you wrapping up? Or
That's it. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
we're finished. Finished.
Thank you
I
very
like,
much.
I like the conclusion. Thank
Yeah.
you very much. And have a
Good
lovely
night, everybody. Good night.
Happy Ishtar.
Thanks.
Happy
Happy
Ishtar.
Ishtar.
Where's everyone?
Thank
Yeah,
you,
happy
everyone.
Ishtar.
Bye.
Bye.